You gotta jump in with both feet. Don't dabble. You'll never get to where you want to be if you want to dabble. And speaking on camera is absolutely, without a doubt, the new public speaking. And you know that's important to do. So get in front of the lens.
Hi, and welcome to Helping People Perform, the podcast that gives you fascinating insights into those people whose chosen vocation is to help others perform at their best. From consultants to teachers, sports coaches to financial advisors, all of my guests share a passion for getting the most out of individuals, teams, and organisations. Enjoy the episode. Hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of Helping People Perform. Delighted to be joined today all the way from the New York City area. We have Emmy-award winning TV anchor turned media trainer and public speaking coach, owner and founder at Kerry Barrett Inc. Welcome to the show today, Kerry Barrett.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited for our conversation.
Me too. There's so much in the initial chat and the comms that we've had before this. I think there's some amazing stories that you've got and some amazing insights that are going to really inspire and help the audience that we're dealing with here. So maybe we could start off a little bit about your background. You know, what got you to where you are today?
Yes, and I'll give you the abridged version because I've told this story in varying formats and sometimes it's quite long. I used to be absolutely terrified of speaking. Not speaking is not the right way to put that. I used to be terrified of even being seen. I couldn't get up and do a group book report, in the seventh grade with my friends. And I actually wanted to be a veterinarian because I do love animals, but I also was hoping that it would limit my opportunities to speak to people because I didn't like that part so much. Organic chemistry put a fairly quick and decisive end to that career plan that I had had for my entire life. And so I re-enrolled in college now, of course, as a communications expert, or as a communications major rather.
Yeah.
And I knew that the field was very broad and I was hoping that it would allow me to find something that I could use to make a living. And I also knew that I didn't have any organic chemistry classes in that major, but more importantly, I was going to have to take 2 public speaking courses that I was hoping, despite how scared I was, would help me sort of get my arms around that particular fear, because I did know in some way intuitively at that point that it was going to hinder me, this particular fear and challenge that I had. It was a debilitating, crushing fear that I had. And I ended up not only getting my arms around it, but also really falling in love in the course of changing my major, the broadcast journalism industry. I loved specifically the storytelling. I loved the video element of it. And I loved the adrenaline that went along with breaking news and being on camera and the challenge that was there every single day with that. So now I had to figure out how I was going to not just fully overcome this fear, but also get good enough that somebody would pay me to do this.
Yep.
And that process was long and windy and twisty, but at the end of the day, the lesson here is that I managed to stay in that industry, which is insanely competitive, for 20 years. I wound up in the largest market in the country, which is New York City. And I have a couple of Emmys under my belt for my on-air work, which means that I did actually end up being fairly good at it. Yeah. When I left the industry, I then began my new chapter as a business owner. And now I take all of those skills that I learned during the course of my academic, my professional career, and of course, the coaching and mentoring that I received in that business. And I help executives and lawyers and also business owners to a large degree to speak well on camera for impact, for visibility, for influence, certainly for business development and for media opportunities as well.
Right. Oh, fantastic. I mean, love that backstory. And what I really love was the fact that not only did you recognize that was a sort of debilitating fear and something that was going to have an impact on your future career, whatever that might be, but really overcoming that and hitting it head on. So what was it about that process of hitting it head on that transferred that from a fear and a debilitating fear into something that became a passion? Were there any key turning moments, or was it a slow process?
It was a slow process, and I will say that there were, the actual skill development came fairly quickly. I was doing this, remember, every single day. I was on air on live television. And so I always say, for anybody who's looking to get better on camera, going to live video is the best way to get very good very quickly, because
Right.
you have to be able to dig yourself out of whatever hole you've put yourself into, either through no fault of your own because there's some sort of technology issue, or because you've misspoken, or you've lost your train of thought, or whatever the case may be. It's a great way to build confidence. So remember, I was on live television with a live audience with a paycheck that depended on it
Right.
every single day. So I would say that my development was probably perhaps a little bit quicker than the average business owner might expect, unless they're willing to really fully take that plunge. And I do always say, dabbling will never get you the riches that you're looking for. You can't dabble and expect to get good at it. You really do have to jump in with 2 feet. But I am also aware that we all have a million things that are pulling us in a million different directions. So with that said, I will say, while the skill development came fairly quickly because of the everyday exposure, there were other elements that took longer to develop. So it was maybe 6 to 12 months in before I could read a show completely cleanly, have no problems. Everything came out exactly the way that it should, and I was happy with my performance.
Right.
Then it evolved into understanding more of a breaking news format. So when I'm ad-libbing for 10, 15 hours on end,
Mm.
and then being more authentic, so really beginning to put the audience at the forefront rather than my own ability to deliver. And then when I finally was able to put the audience at the front and center of everything I did, all of that other stuff began to sort of just organically elevate.
Right.
What I will say that is, and it wasn't a specific moment in time, but where the real change in confidence came was when I realized that no matter what was in front of me, I could handle it. So in live TV, that means, my co-anchor is not there, the teleprompter goes down, the reporter doesn't make it to the live shot in time, we have a breaking news element that we don't have a lot of information about or any video of, and I have to just sort of ad lib and riff on it for a while by myself until we get more information. When I realized that I could handle those elements, then that's when everything really began to come together. And I have found that in my work now as a business, I just did a keynote yesterday, as a matter of fact, and it was to a large staffing organization here in the United States. And I had a question at the end from one of the attendees that was designed, I think, as kind of a gotcha question. Like, he asked a question and then was waiting for a response that he anticipated, and then he went on the attack.
Right.
And while, when I first started, that might have thrown me for a loop, or I might have gotten defensive, I enjoy that stuff now because it keeps me on my toes.
Yeah.
Most of my clients hate that. They hate the idea of being asked a question that they may not know the answer to right away.
Yep.
But I find that it keeps me sharp. It hones my skills every time I'm asked a question like that. And I sort of relish those moments in a way that I could not have even fathomed when I first started.
Yeah. And did you, out of interest, did you build those things up purely because, things went wrong, the teleprompter went down, your co-anchor didn't show up, or was it a deliberate prep for those scenarios? What was the mix there?
Yeah, there was no intention at all. I was in the fire, and then I was like, gee, I should probably have a plan to get out of the fire at some point. And so then I developed a series of, not even intentionally, this sounds a little bit too deliberate, but really it was a series of playbooks in my mind that I would use to handle any sort of situation. And really, a big part of that was understanding how I could stretch if I needed to, meaning, chew up time, how I could bring new information into a conversation if we really didn't have a lot to go on. And so it was just devising, and sometimes I would write stuff down as as inspiration hit. But for the most part, it was a series of just mental playbooks that I created through my experiences. Well, I never hit that one before. I need a playbook for that particular situation. Or yeah, that never happened before. I had a coughing fit and I didn't have a co-anchor to back me up or take over my I've got to figure out a playbook for that. So it was really, as I hit the situation, I realized I had to add a new sort of chapter or tab into the playbook.
Yeah, I'm smiling to myself because as a long-time facilitator, I've had those similar situations where you turn up and you go, right, I've got my presentation all set up, I've got my PowerPoint ready, I've got my computer, I've even got a spare cable in case they haven't got a cable. And nothing works, and it's just like, okay, what do I do now? Or you turn up and the audience is only half the size, or in some cases, sort of double the size that you thought. And right, how do I change this around and still manage it in the time? Yeah, it's I love that element of the mental playbooks. And did you find, by the way, that those mental playbooks became almost sort of standard framework, so it's like it doesn't matter what the situation, if this kind of thing goes wrong, then I've got an approach to how we do that?
Absolutely. So for example, in the keynote, and while I do keynotes as part of training and certainly part of visibility, I also get paid for them. And so for example, when I was asked that question yesterday about, I won't go into all of the details, it doesn't really matter. When I was asked the gotcha question, I was able to draw from a playbook that I created in my mind, a decade and a half ago, when an anchor asked me a question about a story I was out covering, and I hadn't really put a lot of thought into what that answer should be, or even getting that question. So having to come up with a quick response that was honest and truthful. And if I didn't know the answer, I'd have to say that. So that's another playbook. How do you acknowledge that you don't know the answer and promise to get more information? So in that particular moment, I drew on a playbook that I had created again, 15 years ago.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. And so many parallels with some of my own experiences on a different level. But I've got to ask around the Emmy, or is it Emmys? The multiple Emmys? So what were they for? Can you give us a bit of background as to what that recognition was there for?
Absolutely. So this one that you're seeing right here is for some breaking news that I covered while I was in New York City. I was on the anchor desk. I wasn't out in the field, and it was breaking news about a crane, a construction crane collapse, and several people died, and there had been problems with this particular work site before. So it was certainly the moment of the collapse, but then also, there were these sort of layers of other elements to the story that were very important. So that was for the breaking news coverage. And then there is another Emmy I have. Well, I'm redoing my office, so you can't see it, but there's another Emmy that I have for work that I did in Iraq. I was in Iraq for 2.5 weeks. This is a very long time ago. This was probably about 18 years ago now, for the first Gulf War, and the second. And my work over there covering the troops and their experience is at Balad Air Base, is where I was based. My husband at the time, that's not right. My current husband at the time was in the Air Force. And so his squadron was deployed to that particular air base while I was over there. And we did a huge series. It ended up being about 40 parts about their preparation, their experiences over there, and then sort of what happens when they come back home, which is a huge piece of the puzzle that is often not talked about. That sort of reconciliation and coming together of families and spouses, it can be really challenging. So I was very proud of that story, and it remains and will always remain my career highlight.
Superb. And I do think that, you don't always have to have recognition. It doesn't always have to be that award type piece, but when it comes, it should always be celebrated and have that pride there. So congratulations on those things. And I'm sure many other amazing stories and things that we've done over the years. But maybe let's take you then from where you were in that sort of anchor space to moving into what you do now. So what sort of inspired you or challenged you or pushed you from where you were to take this leap into helping others and helping people perform, which is very much the theme of this podcast.
Yeah, I wish that I had like a grand, I knew I was destined for more sort of story, but no. I had grown increasingly frustrated with television news, not because I didn't enjoy the people that I worked with. A newsroom is an amazing place to be. It really is
Imagine,
full of energy and big personalities, and it keeps you on your toes. But as you may know, or your viewers may be aware, the news industry, at least the traditional news industry, is an industry that's in a state of contraction. It has been since the advent of really the internet, but it's exponentially increased in its contraction since the dawn of social media. People are curating their own news feeds, of course, on their phones now. And context has always been one of the weak spots for television. By that, I mean, unlike digital, there is a finite amount of time that you have to have a newscast. It's half an hour, it's an hour, whatever it is. In some cases, it's 6 hours, but regardless, it's finite.
Yeah.
And context, it is not served well with finite period of time. And so I began to get really frustrated with, why are we covering this and not this? It's because this is easy and it's easy for people to understand and it doesn't require them to think. And that part really began to get under my skin. Right. And so I would say probably within the first 5 to 7 years of my time in the industry, as much as I still enjoyed the storytelling and the newsroom experience and getting up in front of the camera, I started to think about what was next. And then every time I thought about what was next, it seemed like something bigger came along. You're working here, now a bigger market called, or you're a reporter, but now they want you to anchor. And it just seemed like every time I thought about developing a plan, something else got in the way, or something else, said, hey, well, try this. This may be the solution. And it never was. And so when my contract was up in New York City, I just had my third child. He was, I guess, about 7 months old at the time. And I love morning TV. I love it. It's the camaraderie, the viewership is very habitual. They are loyal. But I was a disaster. I mean, getting up at 12:30 a.m. for work every day had really taken a toll on me. I had no social life to speak of. I was a zombie around my kids, marriage on the rocks because I'm always angry, so tired. And so when my contract was up, it was either, sign another, or maybe even at another station and sort of delay the inevitable, because you're not going to get any better, or jump and figure out what comes next. So I jumped. I had no plan. And in the course of networking and figuring out what it is that I wanted to do, I came across a woman who worked in PR and communications. And she said, you're nuts. Like you have this huge skill set. Not only do you have a story about it because you weren't born with natural communication skills. And here's the, side note, most of us aren't.
Right.
Take what you've learned, both academically, professionally, and through the consultants and coaches that you've worked in the news industry, and create your own thing, because executives have this problem. Big business owners, corporations, lawyers have this problem. Business owners who need to be on camera because they don't have a budget. They don't have a $6,000 a month budget for a marketing agency. They need to create their own marketing materials, and video is where it's at in terms of marketing and spreading the word. It's why we do podcasts, and it's why we do webinars, and it's why we are all on social, if we're doing it right. And so I said, okay, yeah, that sounds like a good plan. I'm going to start a business. And so really that's about as much thought as went into it. Before I had, the LLC up and running a couple of days later. I didn't have really an offer yet at that point, but I knew that I had a skill set, and I knew that aside from, helping people get ready for media opportunities, which is fantastic. Earned media is free, and it comes with a huge dose of credibility and visibility. But helping people speak compellingly on camera for speaking engagements, like I said, and webinars, and all of these other sales and marketing assets that business owners and executives, and frankly, lawyers need to be creating in order to expand their awareness and their impact, and of course, their business development.
Yeah, I've seen it on a number of angles from a lot of the companies that I've worked with. I've worked some really big organizations and some smaller ones. And my most recent experience, or my last experience as an employed person anyway, was with McLaren, the Formula One team. And Zach Brown, who's the CEO now, who came in very much from a marketing background, and his ability to engage with the audience through and engage with the fan base and with potential sort of sponsor clients and all sorts of bits has changed the game from the guy who was there before, who was very good but had a very different characteristic. And I think, reflecting on this conversation, but also seeing where I've been previously, there are so many wins out there if you get this right, for even the small to medium businesses, you know, to actually promote your business, to get the word out there, to understand who you're about, because that's what people are interested in. Yeah.
I think it's so interesting that you mentioned that. I specifically appreciate your comparison of the previous leader at McLaren and who you have now, because the guy, and I know the name, but I actually haven't seen any of his video, but I'm familiar with the company. And it's interesting because that is a business that is it's very consumer friendly. We understand, you know, it's fast cars and like really cool visuals and all that other stuff. And it very much makes sense. Sometimes where people get stuck, at least in my experience, is if they are in a more, you know, not necessarily a consumer industry, but they're in, you know, in a very basic way like that. They're in maybe legal or finance or insurance, and it's not visual, and they don't really understand how they should be using video or the importance of, if you don't have a fancy car, your face is the fancy car. You have to be, right? You are the fancy car. Now act like it. Yeah. And they get very caught up in, oh, I don't have the time, or I don't understand the tech. And the truth is, you don't need a lot of time. If you get good on camera, it's going to take you 1 or 2 takes, and you can create a video when inspiration strikes.
Right.
And it's not, there's, all you need is a phone. When you get down to the real heart of it, and this applies, you know, I work with some lawyers who are making, you know, $2,500 an hour, and they still have the same struggle. They may be great in the courtroom, but put a camera in front of them and suddenly they get very buttoned up because they're worried about impressing the people around them, and they don't enjoy the experience. And they don't know if they're doing it right. And this doesn't just apply to lawyers. This applies to business owners. It applies to executives. If you don't know if you're doing it right, and you don't enjoy the experience, and you're not confident doing it, it doesn't matter what sort of fancy phone you have or how much time you have in your day. You're going to find something else to do. You're not going to do it. And while it's important for the, you know, business owner, et cetera, I also think sometimes larger corporations forget that they have an entire army of brand ambassadors in the 4 walls of their business, and they don't leverage them for marketing and sales. And they all should be on LinkedIn, and they all should be establishing a personal brand, because even if that brand applies to your employee, it also means that they're generating awareness and visibility through social and other in-person networking events that draw people to your business. At the end of the day, that's what it's all about. And if you're not fully leveraging your employees because you don't know why it's important, or they don't like what they're doing, or you don't really even know how to get them involved in creating videos for their social media platforms, I can't even tell you how much money you're losing each year. You need to be leveraging the army that you have.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a huge missed opportunity for so many businesses out there. So if one of your clients is engaging with you, maybe it's a lawyer, maybe an executive that's come in, what sort of does that engagement look like? How do you go about helping those people? Is it a permanent, you're there sort of 24/7 for a while? Is it sort of more coaching? What's the style of the engagements that you have?
Absolutely. And I appreciate you asking that. It does depend a little bit, obviously, on time and resources. I always do what I call a diagnostic, right? We do a strategy call that's 30 minutes. Here's what you're struggling with. Here's what your goals are. Here's what you've tried in the past. Okay. I think that I can help you, or I don't think I can help you. You're really asking for this. And if I can point you in the direction of somebody else who can help you very specifically with that, I will. And I won't take on a client that I don't think I can help.
Right.
And then we'll go into a diagnostic. And that's a separate call. And I really work with people in 4 ways. One-on-one, which is certainly more time intensive. I do group coaching for organizations or teams. I do corporate speaking and keynotes and workshops. And then I also have a digital program, which is, you want to dip your toe into this and get started, but maybe you don't have the time or the monetary resources to dive into a full coaching program. And generally speaking, my coaching programs are 3 to 6-ish months. It depends a little bit on somebody's skill set when they're coming in. I have clients who really do need 6 months, but they've opted for 3 because that's where they can start budgetary wise. And we'll see if we can move them into something that is a little more robust. But I create outside of group and digital program, I create a very bespoke custom training package for clients based on skills, right? There's no need to cover the basics if you've got them, what their goals are, and what success looks like to them.
Right. No, wonderful. I've been scribbling a few notes there, and I think one of the key ones that applies for so many, particularly entrepreneurs or people going into business for the first time. I'm reflecting on my own journey here in terms of being employed for so long and then taking this leap into business. The ability to say no. It's such a counterintuitive thing when you're going by yourself, isn't it? It's it feels so wrong, and yet when you do it, I've had to. There's one big engagement that I could have said yes to, and I said no to, and it felt so damn good.
Yeah, I know. I made this mistake a long time ago. I when I first started, you're taking all these clients because you want to have some money, and you also want to create some testimonials. And I took this client, and it just was, for me, not a right fit. And so rather than say when our time was up, say, I think it's time for us to move, in some new directions. I just gave them, and my rates have raised, and I gave them a number that I thought for sure they wouldn't bite, and they bit. And I'm like, oh, sure. Okay. Mental note, Kerry, next time, just say no.
Yeah.
So I've adopted that.
And sort of final question on this then, in terms of when people have been through that experience, what sort of journey do you see them going on, and where did they get to off the back of your engagements?
I love to see when things click for people, and it clicks in different ways. I have a client right now who's trying to create a video for his website for a new service offering, and it's one that he's going to make lots of money off of. It's very much needed in his industry, and he was working on this video for, I think he did 127 takes before he finally reached out to me. And he's very good at what he does. This element was just not it. And I'm like, your problem is not so much your facial expressions and your on-camera delivery, it's your voice. And I know you're focusing on the visuals, but your voice is where you're struggling. And to watch it all come together, here's what's going wrong. Let's watch this video of somebody else who's struggling with the same thing, not a client, but something we find on YouTube. And now here's how you improve on that. Now let's practice it. Now record your videos, and to watch that come together, or for somebody to understand what their soundbite is, and how to deliver it compellingly, or what their story is. I love watching that click. I have a lawyer client as well who just did a book launch, and their videos for the legal press last year were not great. Watching them smile when they saw how their videos came out this year. So knowing that part of it is that intangible ROI, that they actually just feel good and they enjoyed the process, and they're confident about the way that they showed up. But then also to look at what that meant in terms of how many people watched the videos, how many quotes they got in the press, what it meant for their book sales, to watch the actual hard data come in support of their confidence, and the way that they felt after doing the videos is amazing.
Brilliant. I think it's the bit that any of us here, and one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast in the first place, is all these people who are helping others perform at their best. That feeling when you see others succeed off the back of your support, whatever that might be it coaching, be it mentoring, be it sort of training and development. It's something you can't really describe. But if you could bottle it up, I'd be drinking it down 24/7. Let's have a slightly different question then, in terms of in terms of how do you help yourself perform? Because I'm always interested in, you've got people who are spending all of their energy helping others to perform at their best. What are the sorts of things that you do to help yourself be at your peak?
This is a very easy question for me to answer. I've got a stack of books that I plow through on the regular, about some about business, a lot of them about mindset and my own psychological issues. I have a therapist, number two, and I have two great business supports, like paid business supports. One is my business coach, Katie McManus, who I think is amazing. And then the other is a storytelling coach, Patrice Polzer. I worked in the news industry with her, but I really got to know her as a business person. They're phenomenal, and I draw on them every day.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. And I think the power of coaching at those different levels, and what I really like what you're saying there is you've picked specific areas and coaches with specific skill sets. You know, if I need support with my business, I go to my business coach. Or I need support with my storytelling, that's where I do it. And that's the things that are going to shift the dial in terms of your own performance, and that's wonderful. So if you could help, then you've got this skill set and wonderful sort of experience and expertise. If you could help any sort of individual or team or organization to help them perform better, who would you want that to be?
I really do enjoy my work with lawyers and executives, and they help pay the bills. I really do enjoy working with everybody, but I find that it's really impactful for a business owner who is struggling to get their message out and get it out well, and get it out in a way that works for the environment that we're in right now. Yes, you can get on stages, physical stages, and talk to many, many people, but if you're able to do that digitally, meaning in a virtual environment, you have now a 24/7 sales and marketing team that are, at your beck and call, and realizing that they can create their own traction and momentum is huge. And I enjoy the impact that it has on them.
Oh, wonderful. And let's flip that on its head a little bit then, in terms of, if you could sit down and have a coffee, have a meal, have a drink with somebody that you think, wow, after that conversation, I can really lift my own game, who would you want that to be?
This probably sounds a little bit, I'm sure a million people have Nelson Mandela.
Right.
There's two people really. Nelson Mandela, because I think it puts in perspective, it would for me anyway, what my own challenges are, and to draw the inspiration and the way that he was able to keep peace, I guess is a very inadequate word, at the forefront. And also, this is an odd pick, but I wrote an essay about General Norman Schwarzkopf when I was in high school, and he was the commander of the U.S. forces in the first Gulf War. And I remember seeing an article with him in Time magazine. He was on the front page, and he was crying. Not sobbing, but he had a tear. And I remember thinking, this man is so powerful, and he has such a huge job. Again, that's a very inadequate way of describing what he did, but he's not afraid to show emotion, and he has emotion. He's a human at the end of the day. And I found that even at the age of 16 to be a remarkable trait. And so it would be those two that they're not business mentors, but they're life and mindset mentors, perhaps.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's so many lessons that you could learn from each of those people as well, and take that away. So if there was one thing that the audience should sort of think about or take away from this conversation, one thing that could help them perform, what would you want to leave them with today?
You gotta jump in with both feet. Don't dabble. You'll never get to where you want to be if you want to dabble. And speaking on camera is absolutely, without a doubt, the new public speaking. And you know that's important to do. So get in front of the lens.
Fantastic. And yeah, I mean, my own experiences, I've gone into this podcasting world over the last sort of year and a half and gone into more and more guesting as well as hosting. And the experience, and one of the things that you said very early on, that live element, a key tip that I got from one of my previous guests on the show actually was when you're recording a session, particularly if it's just a 2-camera piece, not having a conversation with a guest, is don't give yourself multiple takes.
Yep.
Do it in one go.
Yeah. And if you're doing it, if you're taking more than, let's say, I'll give you a little grace. 3, if you're doing more than 3 takes, you're overthinking it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how it's changed my game and changed my confidence in my own presentation and all sorts there. So, I mean, been amazing chatting with you. If people want to reach out and find out more, because I know that you've got something upcoming in the next few months, haven't you, in terms of a new course? Can you tell us a little bit about that before we...
We do. Actually, I say we because I'm working with one of my dear friends who owns a publicity and a PR agency here in the United States. About 3 months from now, and I'll tell you where you can get updates if you're interested, we are launching a workshop for small business owners, founders, how they can create their own PR, how you can pitch the media and get featured in the media. And that will be her element of the workshop. And then how you can handle that media opportunity well. So understanding what it's like to be in a studio, how to deliver an effective and compelling interview, whether you're at home or in the studio, the correct follow-up, being comfortable and confident on camera, understanding how to ask and answer and handle questions as well. But you can find information. I don't have a hard date on that for you.
Yeah.
It'll be about 3 months as of the recording of this podcast,
yeah.
But you can find updates on my LinkedIn profile. Just look for Kerry Barrett there. Yeah. Or go to my website, which is kerrybarrett.com. You can also find a bunch of free resources on my website as well, kerrybarrett.com/resources.
Brilliant. And that's KERRYBARRETT. Is that right?
Yes.
Fantastic. So, yeah, I mean, as I say to all of my guests, really appreciate you coming on the show. And I always say to my audience, take this opportunity. If this is something that's going to be of value to you or just of interest, do reach out to my guests. The reason that people come on podcasts is to get more connections and to talk to more people. So do take the opportunity to reach out. If you've got that opportunity to go on that course, I mean, it sounds like a game changer for a lot of people. So best of luck when that goes out, which should, based on, we're sort of towards the end of April right now. So I'm thinking sort of July-ish time. But as you say, look out for connect with Kerry on LinkedIn in particular, and you'll get updates on that front. So, Kerry, thank you so much for this wonderful interview and for sharing your story and sharing your experience. Really appreciated you being on the show today. So thanks for being such a great guest, Kerry Barrett.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to be here. You're a great interviewer.
Thank you so much. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you liked what you heard, then please give the podcast a rate, review, and share. I'm Paul Teasdale, and from sausage making to banking, oil and gas to Formula One, I help people perform. If you'd like to find out more and have a conversation, contact me via helpingpeopleperform.com.